Di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Hi-di-di-di-di-di-di. Hi-di-di. 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 Di-di-di-di. Di-di-di-di-di. Di-di-di. Hi-di-di. Di-di. Hi-di-di. Di-di. Hi-di-di. Di-di-di-di. Di-di-di-di-di. Nine, 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 nine. Shalom, shalom, beautiful friends. It's wonderful to see you, wonderful to be with you. Thank you for joining for session number 7 of leadership lessons, lessons on leadership. I'm excited to explore this with you. And my learning today is in honor of my wife, Shoshana, who is donating her kidney tomorrow, and in honor of her recovery and successful procedure, and the recipient. My kids couldn't stop laughing last night because Shoshana said they're going to take the kidney, they're going to put it on a plane and fly it to Florida where the recipient is. And the kid and my 6-year-old son is just thinking about this kidney, like sitting on a seat of the plane, like smiling on his way to Florida, getting a free vacation to. He just could not stop laughing. I said, "Oh, it's going to be on ice in a box, probably not in its own seat, And he's just picturing this vacation. So, anyways, so my learning is in honor of both of them. And let's start with a poll question, a little poll question on our topic today. Is it more important for a leader I want to follow to be bold and courageous, humble, really smart? Is it more important for a leader I want to follow to be, think about people who you might want to follow, so to speak, in any sense. Do you want them to be bold? I mean, maybe all these things to some degree, but if you were to think, okay, what separates this person from another? Okay, 43% bold and courageous, 57% humble, 0 say really smart, although I'm sure we all appreciate leaders being smart too. I wonder if the session today was on leadership qualities of being bold and courageous, if we might have had a different result than knowing that the class coming is humility. Yes, that is fair to have to be unhappy with the choices I give. My goal in giving polls is for everyone to be unhappy with the choices. Okay, friends. So we're going to explore the vital leadership quality of humility. What is proper humility? How does it function? And why is it so important today? William Temple, the Archbishop of Canterbury, taught humility does not mean thinking less of yourself than of other people, nor does it mean having a low opinion of your own gifts. It means freedom from thinking about yourself at all. Now, that is often misquoted. That's the official quote. But when it's misquoted, it sounds a little better, which sounds something like humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less often. I think that sounds a little better. And the misquote. So hopefully I'll be misquoted at the end of my days into something better than I actually ever said. Humility, anava, or sometimes shiflut, is a favorite focus for Musar literature, works that discuss ethics and self-improvement. In the 11th century, Shlomo ibn Gabriel wrote in his work, The Improvement of the Moral Qualities, "Do you not see that humility is the greatest of all the good levels of achievement?" The Igeret HaRamban, a pocket-sized medieval classic of Musar, calls humility the best of all good traits. Tomer Devora, a 16th century Musar work of Sfat Kabbalist Rabbi Cordovero, lists humility first among the midot. The personality traits to strive for, and describes it as the trait of humility, which includes everything. It is a trait over all of the traits. Now, to be fair, when all the traits are explored, usually someone says, this is the most important one. The most important one is be happy. The most important one is be kind. The most important. So it's not rare that people are like, all right, that's the most central one. Sometimes they say it about multiple ones themselves. It's kind of like if you ever go to shul and they say, this is the most important parsha. Like, okay, you said that 3 weeks ago, you know? In any case, humility is probably the most common one, midah, that is shared to be kind of most central. We cannot speak of humility and leadership in a Jewish context without speaking of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. Numbers 12:3 describes him. Now, Moses himself was very humble, more so than any other human being on earth. When God called Moshe to lead the people at the burning bush, he demurred, saying he was not suitable for the task. Oh, a little funny burning bush story. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of tangents. But a story I told one of my kids going to sleep last night, and he could not stop laughing. I was trying to put him to sleep. Instead, he's rolling on the floor laughing. And here's the story. It's a true story, or allegedly a true story, about a famous German scientist. And the German scientist was raised Catholic, but then he became a scientist. So he started to question whether there's a God at all. So one day, he went out to the beach on a starry night and started screaming, if you're really there, God, give me a sign. If you're really there, show me a burning bush. If you're really there, speak to me. And all of a sudden, the man was overwhelmed with a loud voice that emerged. Shut up, I'm trying to sleep here on the beach. A homeless man living in a tent on the beach. I told my son this story. He just could not stop laughing because he thought at that moment like God was going to reveal God's self to this poor scientist desperate for truth, and that was the response he got. But anyways, I just thought of that because of this point about the burning bush here. Dr. Erica Brown has written about the importance of Moshe's humility as an essential part of the leadership and a model for us all. Here's what Dr. Erica Brown writes. She's a great writer, by the way, if you haven't read any of her stuff. Moses' humble objection to leadership set the standard for the rest of us. Even when we agree to a task, the question, who am I, should be a whisper in our ears always. It helps us appreciate that great leadership is about influence rather than power, modesty rather than publicity, deeds rather than words. According to Dr. Brown, Moshe's model of a leader's humility is about both healthy self-doubt and about making sure your leadership is not selfishly driven by a desire for attention, but instead is focused on achieving ends you believe in. It's funny, if you're like me, you're like, that art is false. The movie The Ten Commandments did not look like that. And so you assume this is a lie, right? The Ten Commandments movie had it all right in terms of what the burning bush looked like. That's the problem with the movie, is it's hard to get past it in any case. But by the way, I mean, of course, the Hasidic teachers think the burning bush was an inner subjective manifestation, right? This was something that happened within him as opposed to some external, flame. In his book, Or HaOraita, The Light of the Torah, Rabbi Mebratu Solomon writes of the Beit Israel community of Ethiopia. This is kind of fun, right? Because we're quoting an Ethiopian Jewish scholar. How often does that happen? The Ethiopians are never learned, but they've got their own scholarship, and so we should bring their Torah out. We talk about racial justice in America. Israel has its own racial justice issues, and one of them being biases and discrimination towards Ethiopian Jews. I mean, there's many different racial issues in Israel, but that is one of them. In any case, tangentially, I got another tangent. Israel is facing another asylum issue right now because non-Jewish Ethiopians are coming through the border again, and those debates once again are emerging of what to do with these Ethiopians that no African country will take or no one in the region will take, and that Israel let in. And but also doesn't want to absorb for various reasons. In any case, back to Mebratu is his first name. Our community is characterized by its humility, and as a result, it knows to give a place to each and every person. It has modesty, honor, and love. Our leaders are modest people devoted to the community. Through anava, humility, they knew to lead the community to the keeping of Torah, mitzvot, and to connection among all the Jewish communities of Ethiopia. There's no doubt that their inspiration came from the leadership of Moshe and from his qualities. And it is the responsibility of the leaders to continue guarding that same leader humility in order to continue to educate the next generations to those same worthy values. For Rabbi Solomon here, Moshe's model of humility and leadership is about ensuring that everyone has their place in society and enabling leaders to effectively lead through intimate knowledge of the population and about maintaining good relations all around. It also seems to be a value in and of itself. Not only in Jewish sources does Moshe represent the epitome of the humble leader. In Moses, Man of the Mountain, a novelization of the Exodus story, Zora Neale Hurston expresses a distinctly American and distinctly African-American interpretation of the significance of Moshe's humility for his mission. In her telling, toward the end of the novel, the people of Israel try to show their appreciation for Moshe by presenting him with a crown that they made for him and inviting him to be their king. Moshe is crestfallen. Oh, there's a mistake here in the slide. I'm sorry. That footnote is incorrect. This is the quote we already learned from Mebratu, and this quote is from Zora Neale Hurston, who I just mentioned is this African-American scholar who wrote this book, Moses, Man of the Mountain. So excuse that. Moses stood up and thanked everybody very kindly, but he went on to say that he wasn't sure that people ought to have kings at all. It's pretty hard to find a man who wouldn't weaken under the strain of power and get bigoted and overbearing. He himself might not be any better than nobody else if he had the chance. So they better let this king business rest for a while. This freedom is a funny thing, he told them. It ain't something permanent like rocks and hills. It's like manna. You just got to keep on gathering it fresh every day. If you don't, one day you're going to find you ain't got none no more. I'm getting kind of old, and I've been with you like you say since back in Egypt. It's been kind of tough sometimes, and maybe I neglected a lot of things I could have done off by myself. But if you just keep free and be a fine nation of folks, I'll feel like I bought something with my life. You done got free of Pharaoh and the Egyptian oppressors. Be careful you don't raise up none among yourselves. Moses left with a drooping heart. The people had missed the whole point of his 40-odd years of work. He loved freedom and justice with a fierce love, and he wanted Israel to be free and just. All that he had done to them and for them was intended to bring them to his viewpoint. And here they were wanting to be like other halted people that they had touched along the way. They despised their own high destiny. They misunderstood him so far that they offered him a crown. So that's I find very interesting, this read that Moshe rejects kind of his own kingship and a kingship of Israel. As you know, in the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel, the book of Shmuly, there is a big conversation around what to do with the people who want a king, and Samuel's real desire to reject that, and God finally kind of gives in and says, "Fine, if they want it, let them have it." And as we see, it didn't work out so well. Judaism with kings and was kind of a problem. In any case, in Hurston's read, Moshe's humility is not just the way he leads it; it's essential to why he leads it. Moshe's humility is an anti-authoritarianism that is the mission of his life. Humility is important because of the corrupting influence of power, and humility is important because our goal is universal freedom and justice. We've just heard three different interpretations of the lesson we should take from Moshe's humble leadership. Moshe is not the only great Jewish leader described as humble, of course, though. Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, the great redactor of the Mishnah, is another. The last Mishnah in Tractate Sota includes a statement that when Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi died, humility and fear and sin ceased. By the way, he was the redactor of the Mishnah, if you didn't catch it. Meaning he was so extraordinarily humble that losing him meant we later generations have never interacted with someone truly humble in this way. The Talmud transmits a surprising response to this teaching. The very end of Tractate Sota of the Babylonian Talmud quotes that line of the Mishnah. When Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi died, humility and fear of sin ceased. and then reports Rav Yosef's response when someone recited it. Rav Yosef said to the reciter, "Do not teach that about humility, because there is me." In other words, don't say that there has never been anyone to match Rabbi Yehuda, the prince's humility, because there has been. It's me. I'm fantastically humble as well. Isn't that kind of ironic? How can Rav Yosef praise himself like that for his own humility? It doesn't sound very humble. Well, different commentaries propose different answers to this question, and each one provides us with wisdom about the nature and the value of humility. Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chida, an itinerant scholar of the 18th century, explains that Rav Yosef was worried that if students recite a teaching that humility died with Rabbi Yehuda the prince, they will not see humility as a possible character trait to strive for, and then will really lose humility. The Chida's interpretation reminds us, in the context of discussing humility, the danger of self-deprecation. If you talk down your own potential, you actively and actually limit your potential, even to be humble. A different approach comes from Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, a late 19th and early 20th century Chacham known as the Ben Ish Chai. By the way, I call them Chacham, in case you're not aware, because Sephardic Jews typically call their leaders Chacham instead of Rabbi. Rabbi is an Ashkenazic way to call your leader, and in the Sephardic world, they might still call them Rabbi, but generally they call them Chacham, which means sage or wise one. Ben Ish Chai suggests a more specific understanding of what anava is referring to in this passage. He said that it applies to someone who has a high school station, who has a high social station in terms of wealth and communal political power, as well as being an accomplished Torah scholar. Someone with all of those advantages shows themselves to be an anav, the Ben Ish Chai suggests, when they have greatness come to their hand and they refuse it, passing it instead to someone else. He quotes a passage from the Jerusalem Talmud, in which Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says that if Rav Huna, the head of the diaspora, came to the land of Israel, he would give Rav Huna priority over himself. And Rav Yosef observed out that he too fell into this category, because Rav Yosef had station and wisdom, and he was supposed to become the head of the academy of Pumbedita in Babylon. But he declined and passed the honor on to Rabbah instead. The Ben Ish Chai goes on to claim that Rav Yosef was not saying, never teach that Mishnah about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's humility. He was saying, don't teach that Mishnah in front of me. Why? If you hear praising the humility of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi for being willing to give up his station, well, I did that too, and I might get too proud about myself. The Ben Ish Chai's interpretation teaches us an important understanding of what humility is. He says it is the willingness to step away from honor or step down from a position of power in favor of someone else to cede opportunity. This humility is not a question of self-image, self-esteem, not an internal, emotional, or intellectual state. This humility is a practical action that people do or do not take. A third explanation is more straightforward. Hanoch Zundel ben Yosef of 19th century Poland says that Rav Yosef did not say this by way of self-aggrandizement, but rather by way of truth, for he found in his heart that he had this quality of anava. Humility and believing or saying good things about yourself are not a contradiction. Knowing the truth about yourself and having the confidence to claim your good attributes fits together with humility. Humility is not self-deprecation, it is accurate self-awareness. I would phrase it also like this. True humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less, as I said earlier, is the way of understanding that other quote. It's very easy to be self-deprecating in any way that is entirely self-centered. Imagine trying to work on a project with someone who is constantly bringing the conversation to their own limitations. Or within yourself, the voice that harps on your faults. Such an attitude deserves empathy and understanding, but it's not a helpful quality, and it's not the sort of humility that our sacred texts are advocating for, I believe. We are seeking, I believe, the opposite, a decentering of self. Leadership in particular is about raising up others and raising up the cause, rather than raising up the ego. It is not about you. Neither affirming your greatness nor affirming your lowliness is the point of good leadership. Because with humble leadership, you're not the focus at all. But it isn't about self-annihilation either. You are important for the cause and for the others around you, and your needs matter too. Learning to take up less space is a part of humility, but ultimately what is needed is to take up the right amount of space, sometimes less and sometimes more. One of the beautiful places in the Jewish tradition where we see the lesson of limiting how much space one is taking up is the idea from Lurianic Kabbalah that we talked about last week as well of divine Tzimtzum. The idea roughly is that before creation, divinity was alone, singular, and all-encompassing. In order to create a universe, God had to contract God's self, or at least seem to contract God's self, to create an empty space in which the universe could exist and be its own self. This is a powerful model for humility in a lot of leadership and interpersonal contexts. Think of the self-limitation required of parents to allow their children to become independent. Think of how an organizational leader must not control everything to make space for other people's creativity. Think how two people in a relationship have to make room for each other's difference. But while this is a useful metaphor, I want to complicate it with two more aspects of the Kabbalistic narrative. The first is that while it is necessary and right that God contracted God's self and withdrew from the world, it is also a great tragedy, both for God and for us. And it is the Kabbalistic goal of humanity to undo that separation, which is to say, as a leader, parent, friend, shrinking yourself to make room for others is an important mode of interaction with a lot of potential to do good, but it is not without its potential to do harm as well. Another feature that I left out of my original description of Tzimtzum is that the space God withdrew from was within God. Tzimtzum is not really about shrinking yourself, retreating, not imposing yourself on the other. Fundamentally, it is about making space inside yourself for the other. Incorporating the other's viewpoints, the other's reactions, the other's experiences and emotions and wisdom that they share with you into your own being, your own self. Much harder than simply taking up less space, that willingness to make room for change inside ourselves is what is being asked of us with the model of Tzimtzum, and what is being asked of us as we work on our midah of humility. Friends, to move to conclusion here, to live with humility means to know our true value and to continue to grow from there. Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, a great 20th century Musar teacher, taught, "Woe to a person who is unaware of their shortcomings, because they will not know what to work on. But even greater woe to a person who is unaware of their virtues, because they don't even know what they have to work with." Just as one can't have an overblown view of oneself, so too one cannot have a negative view of oneself. Maimonides taught, if one has a base view of oneself, one will readily do base things. May we all lead with humility from our true value and raising up others and their value. The last thing I want to share just before we open up the conversation, and we can move back to this. Yeah, thank you. One of the things I'm intrigued with in tonight's presidential debate, maybe you're someone who doesn't like to waste your time with these, maybe you're someone who lives for these, but one of the things that I'm intrigued with in this is how Kamala might choose to embrace humility. I know that the other candidate will show no humility. And the question is, how does a person convey many virtues in a debate? How do you show you're strong and you're courageous and you're capable and you're experienced and blah, 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 and also that you're humble? One tactic is to fight on his level, is to be nasty like him. And some people have advised her to do that kind of thing and using nicknames and put downs, and rather than talk about real policy, just engage in the way he engages. And the other is to try to soar above that in some way and demonstrate some virtues. Now, Part of that gets a little more complicated because we're talking about a woman debating a man and a black person debating a white person. And there's a whole bunch of different expectations that comes with women and that comes with people of color that are unfair. And so how she calculates for that as well is also interesting. That moment where she gains such an upper hand in the past, where she called out Biden in that last debate. It was the calling out, it was the strength that people wanted to see. Right. But in any case, that's just one example of how one of my many moral concerns for the nature of our country is that we have humble leaders that are also bold and courageous and lots of other virtues as well. But how for all the young people watching that, can she be a role model, not just of a strong Black woman, but also of a humble leader, and a smart leader and an experience. There's so many things that unfair pressures put upon her as a role model for women and for people of color that she's got to balance in addition to just winning the debate. And so you might want to engage with that conversation if you're interested in that or something else we're talking about. And now I open it up to you.
I think that the best way to show humility is to say, I've accomplished X, Y, and Z, but I am always willing to listen. And I feel that we can all learn from each other and use the collective wisdom of the Congress, the cabinet that I will have. And I haven't flip-flopped, I've learned. And I am going to learn, and and as I learn, you are on my mind.
Oh, I love that. I don't want to get too consumed with the debate tonight. But imagine if someone was called out saying 3 years ago you stood for this and look how bad it went, and the person actually responded, rather than some strategic maneuvering, said, I actually learned my position was wrong. Or like I learned from mistakes. Like it's almost hard to fathom such a conversation emerging. But anyways, away from presidents for the moment. Yeah, Judy, I love what you said, and I think that that we should not just think about how to convey that for our social discourse, but think about how to live that. Think about how to really revisit, and this is the month of Tshuva in Elul, to think about mistakes and think about how to express those. And some of them, even in understanding. I mean, one of the things I'm astounded by is how rarely people change their viewpoints over decades. I know so many people who really see the world the same way as they did decades ago. And one of the things many Jews have said since October 7th was that no one should see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the same way post October 7th, right? If someone just doubles down on the same thing they already believe, did they learn anything, from this? And I think there's many cases like that. Okay, thank you, Judy. Yeah. Hi, friends. Who wants to hop in?
I'll jump in real fast.
Great, David.
Yeah, Judy, I love I'm always willing to listen. One of my own little drashes is there's a Shema in Neshama. So if you're going to, clean up your Neshama and make it better, listening is the best thing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, David. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's so many great books on non-toxic communication. And there's so much to learn about love, the many layers of communication, and how to truly listen and deepen relationships. And whenever I pick up one of these books, I learn so much, and I find it so hard to incorporate because there's so much to learn. But the many different layers of how we listen to people, truly listen, cognitively, affectively, open-hearted, and how we can be immersed within ourselves, so it's personal, but also step out of ourselves to truly understand. And I think it's a really spiritual practice that Buber was getting us to, that Levinas was getting us to, kind of the spirituality of dialogue. And I think that's a big part of humility. So, David, I'm so glad you brought that in. And I think that um, many of us struggle with that. The ability to really dedicate time to people and to listen to them, because sometimes it's painful to listen to people for various reasons. So thank you, David, for that.
Listening is one of my favorite words, especially because of the community that I deal with, mostly seniors. And they're alone and they have so much they want to say and they want someone to be able to respond. I think listening without responding, though, is half humility, but not complete humility. I think you're really strong if you listen and respond and let people take the horn and kind of lead themselves. I think listening has taught me a lot, and listening has prepared me a lot for what is around my corner. And that's basically it. Listening without acting is only half the story.
Very nice, Steve. Right. That's beautiful. So building on David's point, people don't just want to be heard, people want to be understood and engaged with. And so just to say, I'm listening to you, but you have no clue how the person processed it, to be able to give some indication that the person has been understood and their points are valued, or at least understood and engaged with. Yeah, that is huge. And I appreciate you bringing that up with seniors in particular, who often feel very unseen and very unheard, especially seniors who become more isolated in later years. I think that's something that we can all really grow in supporting people in isolation. Just the last thing I'll say, building off on that before we go to Aglaia there, is that, and which I didn't say earlier, and I'm sorry I sound like a broken record here, but for me, the value of meditating on death is so important to me. And for here in humility it is as well. Just this reminder that, like, it's so easy to believe life is about ourselves when we're alive. And just this reminder of how soon our death is and how soon people forget us, is just this great opportunity to zoom out to being one with all of life beyond our own ego, which we can never fully transcend. And rather than make death purely tragic and fearful, to embrace it as this great vehicle towards humility, where we're serving partially out of our own ego, because we can never remove it, nor should we expect to, but serving out of a place of true care, yeah. Anyways, hi, Aglaia.
Hi. Okay, so actually you can see me today, so it's not as bad. So anyway, though, but yeah, later. Okay, so one of the things that I just wanted to throw out there, though, I don't know if anyone else will relate to this or not, though. Well, one, I am not a humble person. I'll admit that. But two, the other, I mean, I'm vain and everything else like that. I'm a total diva. But the other thing, though, is that like I became less diva, though, over time. I think I mellowed out some, though, because of the fact that a lot of the time, though, when people are arrogant, it's because they want other people to think a certain way. And they're so preoccupied about the impression that they're making on another person. Like, do you want everyone to think that you're smarter than everyone else? Do you want everyone to think, you walk into the room and everybody's saying, oh, that's the most gorgeous person who ever lived and everything like that. You know, I think a lot of the time they're struggling to actually meet those types of expectations actually causes a lot of the problem. So what if we just said, well, this is this person's opinion of me. You know, like they say, well, you know, I don't know, someone said that, hey, you're a smart person. Well, that's your opinion. Thank you for your opinion. It's still your opinion. It's not necessarily just, you know, written in stone or anything like that.
Yeah, Aglaia, thank you for that. Yeah, there's so many tools like the ones you're sharing for us to kind of correct this cognitive error of needing others to give us our value. And I appreciate that so much, around how we can cultivate our own value and not necessarily want or need others to experience that when we walk in. And there was this there was this scholar I was reading recently who talked about 3 stages. Her name's Alice Chen, and she talked about weak ego, strong ego, and no ego. And in weak ego, a person and here it's not always by age, but think of like a kind of a 20-year-old perhaps, someone who's really trying to prove themselves in the world. They're trying to find their own value. They feel threatened when people kind of challenge them. It's attacking their core self. They might be defensive. They might be on edge. Kind of a weak ego. Of a sense of self. Then a strong ego, where most people land as they mature, there's a sense of self, there's a sense of security. One knows they're not perfect, but they know their value, and they don't feel threatened by anyone who doesn't like them or doesn't think they're beautiful or smart or whatever the case is. And then there is the no ego, which I would propose nobody lives at that stage, but people might go in and out of strong ego and no ego. The no ego kind of where when one is just not so interested in the sense of self, there's kind of a dissolution or a transcending of ego. People still have wants, they still have desires, but it's not about their deep attachment to those desires. And so I think that moving back from between strong ego, a sense of self that's not attacked, and that sense of no ego is something to strive for. And I think Aglaia moves us in a really good direction of how do I feel when I walk into a room, of how I want people to perceive me or kind of need them to perceive me. Yeah. Aglaia, you want to add on to that at all? Or
about perception, about how other people perceive you and everything. Okay, so one of the things, I don't work in a field that necessarily promotes humility. Basically though, you walk in as a professor, you're supposed to be the one who knows everything and have all of the answers and everything, and you're not going to. And so that's one of the things, I've noticed there's different camps, in just not to keep harping on this academia thing though, but some of the I've had some friends who are biggest cases of imposter syndrome teaching a class, and we're all sitting there I can't believe I'm actually standing here telling everyone that I know this stuff. And then you're kind of I'm fact checking yourself and everything else like that. And then there are the other ones, team narcissists basically, who are right no matter what. Nothing changes their minds. You can show them evidence, they're still right. So that's, it's an oversimplified way of looking at academia, but pretty much we're a haven for eccentrics and narcissists. So basically, that's one of the reasons why I think about that. I had to think about that a lot, because it was I got to a point in my life when I was okay, I am tired of what other people think of me. I'm just sick and tired of listening to it. And so because of that, though, that was one of the reasons why I had to actually say, okay, it's that person's opinion, and I'm going to go and get a coffee, a decaf coffee. You don't want to see me in my system. So anyway.
Yeah, Aglaia, thank you. My 6-year-old daughter, my sixth grade daughter, said something which I never heard her say before, just yesterday, that she said she has this teacher and he thinks he knows it all. And I've never heard her say that before. Because if you teach 6th graders, you might think they know nothing, I know so much. And so, but she was now picking up that some teachers are humble and some actually aren't, and some listen to her and some don't. And it was so intriguing to her to see that next stage that she was at. And so too for professors, they might feel this, stupid college student. What do they know? But I'm a scholar. I did years and years of learning. And the truth, and it's the same in the rabbinical world. Rabbis who feel the Jewish masses don't know anything. As a rabbi, I went to school for 5 years, 6 years, whatever years. And in fact, the whole reason Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said he started the Musar movement was because what he said happened among rabbis was, back then, the greatest thing you could be as a rabbi was a Talmud scholar. Right? That we kind of lost that world today. In liberal American Judaism, we lost that. Nobody expects their rabbis to really be huge scholars. They expect them to be good pastors. They have to be a CEO of their synagogue. They have to be a good speaker. They have to be an okay teacher. But nobody thinks they're a first-rate scholar. American Judaism moved beyond that. They wanted a professional rather than a scholar. But Salanter said that all rabbis wanted to do was show that they were the smartest Talmud scholar, and they would try to one-up each other constantly and argue and show how smart they were. And so he said, I started the whole Musar movement to move us away from like Talmud mastery as the most central, and make it actually about humility and make it about our character, because we've lost that. And so, yeah, similar to what you're talking about in academia, I think is true in every profession. And I appreciate you calling out your own profession rather than someone else's, because all of us know, whatever fields we've been in, perhaps that, we might see similar trends. Yes, Anis, thank you so much. Gary, hi.
Good morning, everyone. I want to go back to, I think, what Judy said earlier, not to change subject directly with humility, or maybe Shmuly, you mentioned it about some people think, or a majority of people think, at older age is exactly what they thought younger, and never really changed their mindset. I think we've all known people like that, but to me, that's just an absolute lack of learning, that people stop learning. And I look around the room, maybe for everybody but Aglaya there, a little older, we're here learning, and continue to learn, because we realize that it's important that we continue to view the world and other topics differently than we were when we were at 5 or 10, or when we were in college or whatever. So so much of at least our country, we stop learning. We finish high school or college and we do our professions, but we don't really continue to learn maybe our particular topics or our specialties, but we don't necessarily always continue to look at the world as a form of growth. And the last thing, I wanted to mention what Steve said about seniors. So the majority of my career I spent with seniors. And I always found it interesting that a bunch of them, I don't have a percentage, would come in with nothing really wrong with them. They just wanted to talk. And my job was to sit there and listen, because they do have a lot of wisdom and knowledge, but you don't necessarily have to speak with them. It's just sitting and listening, and taking in what they want to say. That was my comment.
Okay, very nice. And I will take that opportunity to wish a happy birthday to Aglaya, since we're talking about age of people in the room, as she just shared with us. I don't know what it means that you're going to be in 1 hour and 3 minutes. I mean, I guess that means today, but yeah, but awesome. Yeah.
1:47 Central Standard Time, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Happy birthday, Aglaya. We wish you long life and good health and continued strength, to live 3 times your current age. In any case, Gary, thank you for that. And that point around learning is so poignant. I was going to universalize this, but I'll just put this in I language instead. I remember being so uncomfortable in grade school and in high school and in college and in my first jobs, of like social pressures and homework pressures and grades and proving myself. I remember I was also very happy and had a great time, but I remember being so anxious and uncomfortable in so many ways. And I don't think that's atypical, but again, I'm going to keep it to I language in case you find it atypical. And then I think that so much of my 20s was trying to be comfortable. Like, oh, I'm out of the classroom, I'm off the court, I don't have to prove myself. Now I'm just going to be comfortable. And I think that might be one of the many reasons why people stop learning. Learning is uncomfortable. I mean, there's some type of learning which is just fun, but true learning, where we have to really shift how we think, it can be that cognitive dissonance can throw us off a little bit, to really challenge the way we see the world. And I think once we get into the mindset that all I want is kind of be comfortable, it's kind of hard to return to that space of learning. So that's one of the reasons learning can be hard for me, and I'm curious for other folks how it can be hard for you as well. The one other thing I'll say about the learning is that in some ways I think many of us structure our relationships around values alignment and ideological alignment, and learning means there might be a shift. And that can be scary, because what does that mean for my relationships? I now, with my spouse or with my parent or with my child or with my old friend, see things really differently than I do. And how is that relationship going to change if we now see a bunch of things really differently? Like not some small things like, oh, I'm a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right, like really big things about how we understand the universe, someone changes their religion, someone changes their denomination, someone changes their overall, kind of outlook on life. Yes, hi, Sarah.
Good afternoon, and a very happy birthday to Aglaia. So I think that what I'm hearing is that in order for us to continue to learn, we have to embrace humility. Because until we're willing to own the fact that we don't know anything, how can we be curious enough to want to strive to learn anything? And how can we actually open our ears, much less our hearts, if we can't embrace that piece of humility that allows us to do all of this fundamental learning? And yeah, part of being older, which is really a joy, is being able to stand back and say, I don't know. And I have so much I still want to learn. And I am curious and asking the questions that I wasn't willing to ask when I was 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. I mean, I guess it was about that ego piece that just wouldn't let me go there. However, since we're talking all these professions, I mean, my training was all about one-upping one another. And we'd make rounds at the hospital, and everybody had to one-up the other. And I learned very quickly to just say, I don't know. It didn't matter if I knew or not. I just didn't care, because it was like, I'm not getting into this. This is not serving my learning by pretending or talking about the latest article in the New England Journal of Medicine or wherever, Lancet, who cared? It was like, yeah, if you actually have something to share with me that's meaningful to this patient in this time and will improve their well-being, that's something else. But just to batter one another, to prove that we've read the best and the newest and whatever, seemed like a total waste of time and effort. And I think that's unfortunately a lot of how our school systems have designed things with testing and the smart kids, and always rewarding the people who have the answers rather than the people who don't have the answers. I'm complete.
Great, Sarah. And I see Judy wants to kind of piggyback on that before we get to Matthew. Judy, you want to jump in there? Thank you, Sarah.
No, let Matthew go first.
Oh, okay. So Matthew, hop in there.
Real simple. When I was in college, a significant period of time ago, I was able to take classes, pass, fail, knowing the professor said to me, it's not your academic field, you're interested in it. As long as you show up, I'm going to pass you. I took a class, an honors class in French literature with French majors, and I wasn't a French major, but he said to me, you're interested, I'll let you do it. Our granddaughter, who is a freshman in college, this year was on the phone saying she's taking a class, pass, fail, and she's taking something she would have never taken before, because she can take one class for intellectual reasons. And I think that goes to the previous Sarah's comment. We should be able to do something and not be great at it. For a kid who's 18 years old, for the first time being able to take a class because she wanted to take it and not worry about a grade, I think is wonderful. And that's part of the learning process.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. A type of learning approach that is really not seeking some external validation, but it really enables a student to kind of explore without that judgment. There's really something to say for that. Thank you, Matthew. And Sarah, back to your point, I really believe deeply in what you said, that I don't know anything. I mean, I think there's two types of knowing, the things we have to kind of live with. And here I feel I know a lot. I know a lot about how I want to live, about who I am, about just what I've learned in my 43 years. But then there's a higher type of knowing where I feel like I really know nothing. And I think if we could embrace that type of spirit, it would be really deep. One of the 10 reasons I never went into politics, even though at one point someone was approaching me to do it, was because I precisely that. I felt you could not say I don't know. Like if you were asked a question like, "Oh, what should we do about immigration policy?" And you're like, "I really just don't know. I'm really trying to figure that out." I could tell that. I want someone who's certain, like you're strong and certain about your beliefs. Here's an experiment. Next time you talk with someone, like who you go to lunch with today or coffee or something, right when they're about to talk, say to yourself, "I don't know." Like even if you've known them for 50 years, I don't know you, and I don't know anything about you. Right? I don't know you, and I don't know anything about you. And then you're starting from beginning with a curiosity to learn who this person is. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your friend for 50 years, right? We just assume we know everything about them, and we stop learning about who they are because we assume they're the same person of 10 years ago, right? I don't know any clue who you are. I'm just totally curious in this moment of who you are.
I think it may be helpful to think about humility in terms of its contrast to arrogance. Because why do we read Jonah on Yom Kippur? We read Jonah on Yom Kippur not because of the great fish and not because we hate Nineveh or love Nineveh, but because Jonah was so arrogant as to say, "I know better than God, and I know better than the people of Nineveh what is needed and what is right." And he is brought humble by his experience, but he still needs a dope slap, even at the end, from God. And God says, "What do you know? You care more about the shade above your head than the lives of hundreds of thousands of people." And if you approach the whole thing instead of arrogance with humility, there's no story, there's no conflict. But I think Jonah teaches us as much about humility and the absence of humility as Moshe being called humble teaches us.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of the book of Jonah for many reasons, and one of them being exactly what you said so well. And I think that one of the things that I really struggle with more and more being in social activist spaces, although I believe in so many of the causes that I'm engaging with these activists, is that all of the evil is out there. It's all out there that we gotta, fight. And that mentality that I'm on the side of virtue and the evil's out there to fight can lead to that exactly that type of arrogance, where I have the answers and the world would all be good if we just stop them. And all of us are part of the solution, and all of us to different degrees are part of the problem, and changing ourselves changes the system. I'll say one of the things, since you brought up the high holidays, which is that for those of us who participate, which I imagine is most of us in some way or another in the high holiday season, it might help to think of us as not going to a show. We're not going to a show where I'm looking to judge the cantor's voice or the choir's quality, or how much I liked or disliked the sermon, or the people near me. I'm going there for an experience, kind of a humbling experience. I'm not going there to judge and critique. I'm going there for kind of my own, anti-Jonah experience, if you will. So thank you, Judy.
Okay, thank you. And I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing, or I'm saying the right thing incorrectly or something like that. I want the people in my circle and all circles to feel really good about the things they do well. I want to acknowledge that. I know there's a line that people should not cross in patting themselves on the back, but I absolutely adore seeing people being jubilant about accomplishments regarding things they have never done before. That's it.
I love that, Steve. I think that that's such an important addition here. And I think the key there is I sometimes in my childhood felt that praise was not specific, and general praise can be unhealthy, but when it's specific and like aligned, I found it to be quite meaningful. And I was thinking about this last night when I was at my son's basketball practice, and he came off the court, and I said to him, "You were just awesome. You were awesome out there." And on the one hand, I wanted him to feel really good and help to build his confidence. On the other hand, I kept thinking, like, what is the role, for a parent in cultivating humility alongside confidence? And I think your point here around people feeling really good about, especially is really important. So I throw the question back to the group for our last minute if somebody wants to engage with that. How do we praise people well while also kind of furthering a culture of humility? And that might also be a teacher question, a parent question, whatever the case is. Aglaia, hi.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that actually I like, and it's actually something people have studied, they've, documented this and everything like that though. But when I was a kid, one of the things that was always on my, basically, yeah, you have to be the smartest, basically. You always have to be the smartest and everything. Telling kids how smart they are, though, apparently is not exactly very good for them. It actually kind of it stresses them out. I'm like the poster child of this, okay? So, but one of the things that they did know, though, is that if you tell students that, yes, you did a good job on this because you worked very hard on this, and you put in the effort and everything, well, then that allows them to take pride in their work.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel good, like they actually, yeah, I did this, not, hey, it was because some freak genetic whatever made me, smart. And then there's not as much pressure to appear smart, but to appear as a hard worker. So.
Yes, Aglaia, I'm so glad you said that. And I've read some of that similar stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's called something like a fixed mind mentality or something like this.
Something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fixed mind mentality basically says you're smart or you're not smart, as opposed to kind of a constructivist view that kind of says it's about your effort that leads to your achievements. And rather than praise someone for being smart, you praise kind of their effort. I'm just saying exactly what you just said, but I'm just saying it just as a way of saying that I read some similar points, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. Sarah, okay, you get our last word here.
Real quick, it's I guess I would look at a child and say, it was a great game. How do you feel you did? How are you feeling? I want their take on it rather than me imposing my notion of how well they did, and be able to have that dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's great. That's great. Yeah, moving that part of the praise can be achieved not by just saying you're great, but by how you ask questions and how you listen, that the person feels valued, not just in your statement, but in your attentiveness to that. Yeah, I love that. And just lastly, this fixed mindset versus growth mindset, thanks, Judy, aligns with what Steve said earlier around learning, and what Gary said around learning as well, around this point around this growth mindset about effort. It can lead to the joys of lifelong learning. Thank you all so much and I wish you a beautiful day. Hope to see you soon.